right, David, you're live.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, joining us by Microsoft Teams. And also, we have a part of our audience joining us this morning by YouTube. We're using those two different methods to reach folks. So once again, thank you for joining us. We do have quite a full agenda. Typically, in any year, May is, if you take a look at probably our heaviest agendas, it's May and August as we close out a school year and as we begin one. And typically, the lowest amount, if we've taken a look at the audience participation over the past 10 years, is June and July, because folks are taking time off, and that's understandable. I mean, it'll be interesting if the same thing happens this in June and July with so many things happening, given the unknowns about it's not going to be a normal school year opening in a lot of different ways. And so typically people say, well, I know how the beginning of the year goes, and so no big deal. So we do have quite a bit of material to cover. A lot of things have happened in the last time that we met that are education technology related. And if you all are experiencing things I'm part of every discussion, and we're discussing it because of the intense and compressed nature of trying to get it addressed. We're discussing it, and meeting normally when we would meet once every 2 weeks, we're meeting 2 or 3 times a week in nearly every group that I'm meeting with. So it is an intense period of time with things happening in short period of notice. But a lot of this that I have today is good news. I did want to open up with it. Andy, if you could show the video that I asked you to open up with. This is something for those that, don't necessarily keep up with sports. There's a guy named Rex Chapman who was a pretty good basketball player. He's from the Owensboro area, played for Apollo High School. And he's very clever. He posts on a Twitter post, about just about a variety of things. It's about him is a blocker charge, and it's a basketball term. So the thing I like about this, I don't know for you all if this is kind of staggering, but and if it looked a little differently. So is this one flowing, or is it kind of stopping quite a bit as you guys are watching it?
Yeah, we tested it this morning, Dave. It just happens to be the way the video runs over Teams. We even brought it down in resolution. Okay.
All right. So what I like about this, besides it being, pretty funny, this guy is going about taking care of his, the business. And this happens to, I think, I always would say me 2 or 3 times a day. And I think most of us 2 or 3 times a day where we are, think we got it all planned out. We have something that just comes up and just shocks us. But I really like this guy. He did not fall down. He regained his balance, regained his composure, and of course, is able to get his own good lick in on this hornet before going about during his day. And once again, and I think in the education technology field, the reason I use this example, a lot of times folks, not intentionally, keep us out of the discussion, and we only find out after it's already way down the line, and they probably should have included us earlier. But for the most part, we're able to recover, regain our composure, and hopefully get a lick in and send folks on the right track. So Andy and Megan, thanks for showing that little clip. And I'll use that analogy a little bit as we go down through the agenda of a variety of things that we have to cover this morning. And I appreciate those that gave me some feedback and things they wanted to cover. And I made sure to include those today. And I do the same thing with our OET staff meeting, who, by the way, in the picture behind me, this is our OET staff. This was our last team huddle before we had to go to social distancing. So this was in the early March timeframe. We're getting it's right before March Madness. So we had a huddle where we all were in the same room. And we are, getting ready to have a lunch. We've already met. We're getting ready to have a lunch. And actually, we had the folks on our staff that know a lot about cricket that gave us a little bit update on cricket, and had actually a little thing where we could play cricket just probably where I'm standing. We didn't break anything. And I'm always looking forward to the days that we can go back and do that again. So we have Go Soapboxes up, and we have probably more questions we've ever had, and discussion questions. We're trying to get a good feel, and this is related to topic number 1. And this is our really last best opportunity to ask you all and get a feel for the confidence you have on technology being spent with the federal money and even non-federal money to address education technology to better prepare you for the next year. So we have questions 1 through 9, and you say A, B, and C. The reason we had to do that on the fly, we never asked that many questions until we found out last night they can really ask up to only 10 questions, and so that's why it's broken up into A, B, and C. I really ask that you all, and you're not committed, to this. This has not got your name associated with it. As you know, is to give your best estimate, your best guess, your best swag on these answers, because it does help us make decisions in the department. I take the feedback we get here and just not share it amongst our staff. I share it amongst other parts of Kentucky Department of Education, specifically if they apply to them when we ask questions. So just not our staff knows that we just have a feel for it of these things. So each one of these items, I'd ask you to give your thought and your best effort. And it's just not us. I'm hoping it helps your peers kind of see, and that's one of the reasons we ask it, just not to help us, but to help your peers, in you and your peers, to kind of see where everybody else is at on these topics that we don't necessarily get to, get to know what everybody's at until we get in this kind of setting. So we're going to go through the CARES discussion, and we have questions 1 through 9, A and B. And discussion question number 2B. And so I'm going to ask part of our OET staff, like you normally do, and Dee Dee and Phil and Mike and some others, to take a look at Go Soapbox, why I'm focused in on this, to give me, the feedback that you see bubbling up from the discussion questions. We also have one that's good just to give us, a feel for things that we need to be aware of just in general. I think that's the discussion question 1 that talks about what is your technology staff's have alarm or concern involving technology-related conversations about COVID-19. I know this come up in your regional settings, but this is a good environment to share across regions what you may be finding and running into. And then 2 discussion questions, even though we're asking a lot of poll questions that give us kind of somewhat percentages, is also discussion question is helpful too, is just it allows you to add some context and verbiage where we can't ask in a poll question about what are you hearing so far from your district staff about what sort of EdTech and non-EdTech they're going to be spending with the ESSER funds and the GEAR funds. I sent you a link that it was used for a superintendent's webcast. So if you take a look at the reminder that I sent this morning, I believe it was close to 8 o'clock, a little bit before it, there's a link there that was used for the superintendent's webcast, and it was update superintendents and chief financial officers on the different funding sources that are out there. They're coming from the federal government to help out with the COVID-19 crisis. One is called ESSER funds, and those are going to be approximately $174 million. They're going to all districts using the Title I formula. And there's $30 million going to all districts. And those are primarily for technology-related items. Distance learning and school feeding is the only really categories that's supposed to be used for with the $30 million. And seems like we have someone that probably needs to be muted. So if we have the muters go look. So we have someone online that needs to be muted. So please have someone go through there and mute them as you join late. Be very conscious of muting your line because we do have, I don't know how many people we have on here, but be very conscious of muting it.
Hey, so David.
Yes.
We went ahead and muted them, but I thought it'd be a nice pull-in since we don't have the lower thirds and teams. Just as a reminder, we're not using the Teams chat function for logistics. Also, we want to push everybody to Go Soapbox, and that URL is app.gosoapbox.com, and your code is EdTech. And so we have some good activity in Go Soapbox right now. There's more to come.
So just as a reminder, the link I sent this morning has so you didn't have to remind that whole link. What Marty said, there's a link for a Go Soapbox, and so that's where the discussion is at. Given that right now, Microsoft Teams has the limitation of the first 100 that come in for chat. And even if it didn't have that limitation, I'm not sure that Go Soapbox isn't really the best method for us to capture it. So we want you to go to Go Soapbox for both the poll questions, the discussion questions, and we have 3 of them there. And also for any other thing you have that bubbles up that allows us to understand, what's on your mind. So the chat function is really not, in fact, I have mine turned off. So thank you for someone looking at seeing that people that were responding in that. I think chat helps us, for me, before we get started. And typically for these Teams meetings, you'll see me on a half hour ahead of time, and it's a much more casual setting, and even afterwards. So, we can go by chat for that because I'm no longer looking at counting on people look at Go Soapbox. So going back to it is, if you're kind of wondering, what is this? What is ESSER? What is Gears? What are the kind of money can they go for? ESSER has education technology items that can be listed, that can be spent. Listed the 174 million, your portion, your district's portion, and every district is going to get a portion to be spent on education technology, but it's a wider variety of things. The big difference between the ESSER funds and the GEAR funds is the GEAR funds are really limited, and there's only really 2 items that the GEAR funds can be spent on. Technology that's related to distance learning, remote learning is 1 item, and school feedings is the 2nd item. And at the Department of Education, we have 10% of the money, up to that amount, that we can keep of the 194 million, which is close to 19 million. So that's why you see me kind of breaking it out. 174 going to districts, approximately 19 million is going to be kept at KD agency level for the services, for shared services for all districts. And I'll describe to you what our office put in. And I have previously, but I'll just remind you, and I'm sure our field staff has, but I'll give you more of an update on where those are at. So we want to make sure we're not duplicating effort to what you all are doing. We also want to make sure that we are doing added value services with the funds that we have at KD agency level to services all districts that are related to this COVID-19 crisis. And so that's why you're seeing us go through the all this, of trying to get a feel for you all of where you're at and where you think the money is going. I've tried my best based upon, I think I've met with 6 of the regions, actually 7 of them, and being able to talk with you and try to get a feel for it. I've tried to display that in the KD, the agency leadership team, which is made up of course, commissioner level and my peers from all the other offices like assessment and finance and continuous improvement and so on, to make sure that we feel we have a good feel for it. But you're responding to those gives us more confidence today that we have a good feel for it. But we'll take all that in consideration. For your portion, the district's portion of ESSER and GEARS, you're kind of seeing us give some listing of items there by the way we ask the questions of where we think the money will be spent on. And we're going to spend some time on particularly one of these topics about the internet access at the home of students, particularly low-income students. But we're anticipating, a good portion of it. If you say technology is going toward the end devices, and we're calling end devices, it can be a variety of things. It can be a traditional laptop or a non-traditional mobile device, but not necessarily desktops, because we know during these times, desktops are mainly like boat anchors especially if they're in the labs. They're like boat anchors, and they're not very helpful during the time because they can't easily go back and forth to a student's home or anybody's home. And so this really, more so than ever, even though on the Kentucky Education Technology System, KETS, we've always had initiative from for probably the past 20 years to move from desktop to mobile. This time really shows the importance of mobile devices for the staff, any staff that you have, as well as for the students, given a lot of folks are having to work remotely, and desktops are like say boat anchors, that you can't easily move back and forth in a fluid environment, which I suspect we will have periods of next year. We're back, we're not back, we're back, we're not back, we're back. Part of us is back, part of us not back. And so a boat anchor does not serve well for those types of environments. So we suspect it's going to be computers of some nature, particularly mobile ones. We think PD is going to be high up on the radar screen, professional development and training for teachers, not just understanding how to do Word, PowerPoint, Excel. That's always been, on the low there. That's a basic skill, but how to maximize these tools in a virtual setting, whether they're at their school building trying to teach virtually with part of their class live and part of their class watching, or all their class live or all their class watching. Is how familiar they are with the tools that are available to move toward that environment. The next area that is getting quite a bit of discussion, just not in Kentucky, but around the country, is folks trying to immediately solve an issue that's been around for 20 years and I suspect is going to be around for quite some time after that, is the internet access to the home, particularly trying to get a wired connection. And it may be 5, 10, 20, 30 years or never that a wired connection goes to everybody's home, especially the last mile, as we call it, the last mile wired connection. 5, 10, 20, never. And there'll be certain areas that they will have to go with wireless. And so the discussion is how involved will the district be in providing a last mile wireless connection for low income students, and that could be through the hotspot service that's already available on smartphones, and we know an extremely high percentage of Kentucky students have smartphones, and our data shows us if we're not the highest in the nation, we're one of the highest, and the percentage of our students in the middle school, high school level, it's amazing high, and even 3rd to 5th grade they have a smartphone. So can a service just be added onto that, or if not, an additional device? And the reason I mention that to you is I was part of a meeting yesterday that had the educational cooperative directors on it, and there's certain cooperatives that are moving and looking to get in the business of providing hotspot services for their school districts. And part of my thing is I really want to make sure you're all part of that discussion and make sure that your superintendent and finance officers aware that you need to be part of that discussion. Because there's obviously some internet safety and security parts. You want to make sure that's not used just by everybody in the house, and how quickly data can be eaten up, no matter if you provide those, if they're used for non-instructional things of watching, videos and things that are not related to instruction that just take up a lot of the bandwidth. So I hope you're part of those discussions. The fourth area that we anticipate, and Marty, hits on this some, is just the digital curriculum that's out there, and a variety of tools are out there. In other areas, learning management systems, we do know how valuable those are, whether we're in times like this or whether in times they're in the classroom. And we're just trying to get a feel for what other things you think are on the radar screen of having to do this environment. You see those funds going toward. Is it cameras that you now have in the classroom, not necessarily counting on the camera on the laptop for the teacher if they come in the classroom to develop it, but there's some other device in their classroom that is sending that signal upward. So, a good part of this is just trying to get the feel. So I think the next step I'd like to do is just go through the responses you have so far to the Go Soapbox questions. And I encourage you throughout this webcast, because we'll circle back. Don't feel like, well, I didn't get to that yet. We will go back. And even when this is done, it'll be a few hours or days that we'll look at it. But I got to tell you, the most important ones is probably before this webcast ends, because Annie and Megan take a snapshot of that, and particularly what we're asking, because we're very interested in these answers. So let's show the response to poll question number 1, if we could.
David, you should see the screen up now.
See, I do now. Yeah.
Marty, have you got it?
Yeah, can you show that up there, Marty? Can one of you show it up?
Let's see.
Yeah, I've got it. I have one and got. Yep, there we go.
Okay. So that's good.
Right.
That's an improvement. Obviously, we asked this question last month. Encourage you to get up up to speed on it. For that 17% that's not, is I highly encourage that you do. It's a lot of money. That in this time, there is no better shot that we've ever had for federal money that is in the mix of a variety of other priorities than this one, right, this time frame right here. And so, to give you an example, when this 10% funds became available for KDE, I was the very first office to say, I think we have some things we can use that for. That share all school districts, not for KDE agency, that can be helpful to all school districts. And this is your best timing. I've sent you a link that you can get familiar with what kind of things they can buy. But that's good news. That's an improvement. But obviously, we want that to be 100% or close to 100% of folks that are aware of it. So please come up to speed with it and try to interject yourself into discussion. So let's go to question number 2. This is just your total swag estimate for the CARES, the $174 million. And this one can be spent on a variety of things. So this is not as condensed. So 62 so far, and encourage the, I don't know how many we have of districts on here, that we have at least one of your representatives of your district that's responding to this. Boy, close to 0%, that would be a sad kind of thing if that's really how that plays out. And I'm not, I'll let the rest of staff, I don't see anything that I'm surprised about. And we're always trying to think of the percentages to use here. And this is there a mix of a lot of different things that you have going on. So make sure you give yourself a chance for an at-bat for this money. And as I say, I think it should be a top priority. Marty, you were getting ready to speak.
Yeah, collectively, if 70 to 75% of our responses are looking at anywhere from 30% or greater percentage of the total ESSER funds. Again, that's the larger pot of CARES Act funding. That's right in alignment with why, and David, you pushed on this, but just to reiterate, why it's important for us to also understand not to duplicate efforts.
Yeah,
because that's significant percentage of funds.
So let me give you an example. We say, well, why can't the department just buy a bunch of, laptops going to schools? Well, our portion is just 19 million. Obviously, you add this with the GEARS funding, the 30 million, that's over 200 million. So we're trying to maximize each one. We would only be able to reach, obviously, a fraction, whereas the 174 plus the 30 million can reach a very large percentage. So that is encouraging. Let's go to number 3, and this talks about the GEARS funding, and this is the not be these times.
One day we may have to go back and crosswalk with districts, because it could be that with that being the smaller pot of funds, a district may be spending a lot of their ESSER funds on technology, and maybe that gear is dedicated to something else. So I may have to know a little more.
Yeah, and these are just swags, and I'm not being crucial. And the more, and once again, I encourage you, if you're not on, go look at the email. If you just joined, that I sent close to 8 o'clock this morning, it shows you how to get on Go Soapbox, and really would appreciate you all sometime during this next hour and a half that we have you is going through and responding to these. But definitely as we look at them now, let's go to number 4. So this gets a little bit more in depth, and we can't do multiple choice yet with Go Soapbox. So the ideal way was we would list 4 or 5 things and have it. So we have to list them individually, which has brought us over the 10 limit. So this is asking you with a variety of funding sources. Doesn't have to be CARES, can be SEEK, and some of you are already up, and that's why I said already have one-to-one. Or will provide. How high up on this radar screen is it for you for the next school year?
And David, we also know that for a district who had implemented a one-to-one initiative, if you will, assigning devices to kids from let's say 6th grade through 12th grade, that part of the CARES Act funding could potentially bring that down to 3rd grade or all the way down to kindergarten.
Yeah.
So basically expanding the initiative.
Yep. And that's encouraging, and that doesn't surprise me.
I'll also pull in David with this question because I think it's very timely. Some of the discussion questions that have been favorable and go soapbox right now is the point about just a concern that with this one time, and again, this is one-time funding, just the ongoing sustainability of an initiative like this, and Randy Bailey and others have added to that's something that's in the front of their mind, which is smart.
It should be, and in every discussion I'm at too, I'm thinking, well, how do we sustain this afterward? But the other thing we're balancing is this flood. I know you're getting at people saying for the X percent, and we think it's between 8 and 15% of students that don't have internet access at home, particularly if they're low income, is what do we do about the devices and the internet access? And it comes up over and over again, particularly with the co-op directors in those meetings, and that have the superintendents in it. So we're just trying to get a feel for it. At the same time, I always tell them, have you addressed the people side of this? Because the CARES money can address the people side in your district. They can temporarily hire additional technology staff to ramp this up, or services. Same thing with digital learning coaches. They can do that, which I think this is a unique time. They really need to consider that. So it's just not buying the stuff. It's buying the people as well that comes along with this. So as I look at it, I'm assuming that the people side of this is, as you're the one-to-one, is the people side of it's being addressed as well. So in hindsight, maybe I should just added the sixth question, do we think the people side of this is going to be adequately addressed? And so since I can't do that, please just do that in your comments if you can, and go soapbox. But we're very fearful, and I know Robin Kinney, our Chief Financial Officer, always talks about this one. For all these items, have you appropriately dealt with the people side for which they're getting it now, the total cost of ownership way beyond initial buying it? But I'm not surprised about that one. And I do hope this has folks shifting from the desktop and the labs to, I know there'll be X amount of labs always, and that's always been a goal of ours, is try to get the labs down to a really low number, particularly at middle schools and high schools, where the student just takes the device with them and turns any area to web. And I recognize elementary school, particularly younger grades, there always will be kind of a shared environment. So, the internet access at home, and getting into the business of paying for that. And so the approach that we've had, that we've given out the guidance, is to make sure people are aware of the options where they can buy it for themselves, for the homes, that with the hotspot service that either comes with a smartphone, and nearly every adult, despite the socioeconomic situation, has a smartphone with internet access, that can buy a hotspot that goes with that. And there's external devices. This one in particular would have the concern of the ongoing costs. What would be the funding source from that point forward for the low-income students that don't have it at their home already? And we do know, as Jody Rose pointed out long ago for me, poverty is a sliding scale right now, and low income is a sliding scale right now. So let me just look at the responses to this. Okay. And you may get some external pressure if you're not to address this beyond in the district actually getting into the business of buying and paying for the extending the plans, the existing data plans of districts of the students, so they're not have to buy a separate device, and those devices can range from $50 to $250, just the external device. If they so using a smartphone, if you can use that purpose, is even better. Number 6. So PD comes up quite a bit. We spent quite a bit of time, and this was encouraging. The agency is we put in the need for PD as I defined it to begin the broadcast. So I'm not going to go through all that, but I was encouraged that 4 or 5 other offices also recognize the importance of it and put it in their funding request for the $19 million. So we went through an exercise last Thursday to get all those offices together and say we need a unified front. Do we really, to make sure we're not duplicating what districts are already doing? And we we suspect that you all be doing this, and this is these numbers don't surprise me. And this is where a good use of that money. We're going to be figuring out, as Marty knows, our next big step associated with this, with the 10% of funds that we're using for PD, is how do we beef up our digital learning team and the model that we already have, where we have a good percentage of districts that have a digital learning coach, and beefing them up and building capacity. And I know Marty said our digital learning team has been in over 100 school districts this past year recently. Maybe it's a year, 2 years, but it's been recently, and they've been asked to come in. And it's just not been a 1 hour. In many situations, it's for days that folks have allowed that. So very well respected team that we have. How can we beef up what they're doing to help build capacity within your organizations for what you're already doing?
And just to add on to that, David, it's just the model of real-time ongoing, so that the efforts can sustain and scale and build that digital learning leadership. And that also includes library media leaders as well in this strategy.
Yep. So let's go to 7. And this is the learning management systems. I know you all have that. Some of these are at no cost. These learning management systems cost zero money, and so you're just using those. So it's not like you have to spend any money, that you have them. But we're just trying to get a feel for it. Marty, do you have any question related to this one, or any kind of clarification as we're answering that one?
When I peeked at this as responses were coming through, the majority of folks have identified for the last several years through our digital readiness work that, tools like Google Classroom as a learning management system are the primary go-to. And I suspect that's why 38%, plus the not on the radar, that, tools that are freely available, that we already have access to, that make that makes sense. I think the thing that we'll point out here, and we'll touch on it a bit later quickly, is the value in having a district-wide strategy for a structured learning experience. A consistent structured learning experience is just vital. And so that's why we view learning management system conversations moving forward.
Let's talk about digital curriculum.
Okay. And this is an area, David, that this is an area that we also know the annual expenditures on online curriculum, apps, services, tools that we may pay for. Year over year, that continues to increase. We look at that annually as we do as we present to our Kentucky Board of Education, correct, David? And so that's why we view this, and we pulled this in as an additional conversation with CARES Act and SEEK and other formula-based funding sources.
So before we get to number 9, I'm going to give a little bit, we talked about the 10% fund. So I suspect today or tomorrow, I'm going to get the green light to move forward with the items that we requested out of the 10%. And the reason I've been pressing on folks to go forward with these is, if we wait much longer, every week that goes by in these days is like waiting a month. Because in trying to have this available for July, let's say school starts as early as July, is we have to start moving now. We got to move beyond analysis paralysis. And just like the PD, we will start moving forward with what is the shared services that we offer, understanding that what districts are doing. So we're getting a big bang for the buck for that. So that's the number one item that is going to be approved going forward. The other one is the Lightspeed relay and analytics. And this will allow for, I expect a green light to move forward with that today or tomorrow. And this allows the districts to do management of their devices, no matter where they're at, and protection of those devices. It'll also allow analytics for you to get real-time information about what are the devices being used for. They go way beyond what you've ever been able to before. So it allows you to see, well, maybe we don't need that thing that we're buying, that service that we're paying for, whether it be digital curriculum that you're seeing that Marty talked about, that, it's like we use 1% of the time, that we need to go to this other thing that maybe teachers are using 90% of the time, and they're doing it on their own. maybe pay for it on their own. Maybe we need to provide that service. So we think that's one of the biggest wins that we can provide, and that's our intention to start that really soon. And I have 99% confidence. I would even add 99.9% confidence that that's going to all be approved.
Pretty strong, David.
The other one is the next generation of the Kentucky Virtual High School. It's not going to look like it did before, but definitely this is an option, and it's going to be expanding upon what Barron County has done with Babel across the state, that model, and partnering with the districts that already, we have 21 districts that already kind of do that beyond Barron County, with higher education, with the educational cooperatives, and of course with our team. And that requires us to get hopping on that if we're going to have something available. We've already worked on Kentucky School of the Deaf and Blind. That's one of our schools that's, besides our Office of Education Technology, supporting all KD staff and all school districts, we also have direct responsibility of Kentucky School of the Deaf and Blind. And so part of our request is to making sure those students with the system adaptive, the one-to-one, all the things that you're looking like in your schools, we've also addressed in ours. And I suspect that has 99.9% probability of being addressed as well. Other one is area technology centers. This is one that has some vagueness, and I'm interested in your discussion that we didn't ask a poll question. But I'm interested in you all in Go Soapbox responding to this. Is what is the level of confidence that the area technology centers, and there's 53 of those right now, can have that, the high school will be taking care of what needs to be taken care of for that student to show up to area technology center. So let me give you a little background and this is not 100%. All these things are not 100%. I'm always, I need to almost begin every conversation. Nothing's 100%, although I'm sure there's 1% exceptions. But I've always struggled with the concept of labs in general, and I know there's some reasons why you got to have a lab. There's a specialty thing on there. And even as folks go between the high school and the area technology centers, I've struggled. Why do we have to buy multiple computers? Why can't that student who is a high school student for part of the day and the other part of the day going to the area technology center get one device? Because we do have the area technology centers, and a lot of them do have, computers and a very high, pretty good high ratio of them. Very high percentage, if not all of them, are desktop. So why can't a student that's going to the area technology center just use one? And I'm sure there's these rare exceptions, but that would be the goal. And then I know there's not 100% way to do that. The 53 area technology centers, about 13 of them, they just have one feeder school. And as I've noticed over the years, whoever is that homeschool, would be Lee County, Casey County, they do a really good job because those are our kids, they feel, and they do a good job of equipping them with whatever they need as they go back and forth between their high school and their area technology center. We have approximately 40 of them where there's multiple school districts that feed into them. And so the unknown we have with that, I was talking with David Horseman, my peer who leads the area career technical education, is what percentage of the students that come to the ATC do we think will have a mobile device that they can bring? And obviously working with the ATCs of, can you not change a model to, instead of everything being loaded strictly on your device, a powerful desktop, why not use the stuff as in the cloud? For example, AutoCAD now can be used in the cloud. It's a cloud service, which means you don't have to have super high power devices to access those like you did before. Would it be absolutely ideal? Yes, it would be. They have an extremely powerful desktop computer that the AutoCAD is loaded right on top of it. But in a pinch, like we are over the next year, and even longer than that, is it really necessary to do that, or different ways to do that? So that's the part of the unknown that we were talking about as they were doing their budgeting, because the area technology centers also get a portion of the GEARS money and the ESSER money, plus they put in for funds this 10% as well. So the last item that we have that we're going to do the Go Soapbox, I'm trying to get a feel for, and Dee Dee, put this one in. Let's talk about online registration. And we had one of the lowest number of people responding to this, which we got to have the numbers up, and we'll do our best with it. So let's show, with Infinite Campus has the ability to do online registration and also has campus learning. And we're trying to get a feel for, arrangement that we had with Infinite Campus. They gave us tremendous pricing to get online registration, which I think could come into play with, parents is begin the school year like we've never begot it. You're going to have a percentage of them that do not want to physically come to the school. And I don't know how big that percentage is going to be, or we may be at the point whenever school starts for you it's an extremely high percentage that don't want to come. So the part that I'm just trying to get a feel for in DD as well is how many will, take advantage of this. And we do know we have districts that already pay for this service. So obviously us paying for it at the KD level means you no longer have to pay for it locally, and you can use those funds for other purposes. And I'm looking at the next item, which gets me interest in the no interest is good at this low, because we suspected those that had it would really like this.
David,
yes,
sorry.
Go ahead.
The question that came up in the questions is, was this a full version? And yes, it is the prime version, which is customizable. We've talked to Infinite Campus and tried to get ahead of this in case this funding goes through. We want to be able to go full steam ahead. They estimate that they could have this up in 4 weeks. So from the time we start working with districts to stand up a kind of a Kentucky version of it, and then work with districts in the fall to further customize it to meet additional needs. So it's kind of a two-phase thing, but it is the prime version, which is completely customizable.
Yes, thank you, Dee Dee. And this is helpful for us to see. It gives us confidence going forward. This is one of the items, like in the shared services that we buy, we want to have a good feel for it because Microsoft or Infinite Campuses, and this is something we don't have to go, this is something on the contract already. So there's a legal purchase mechanism. But because we are looking at buying it en masse, we can drive down costs significantly. A lot of times it saves 50 to 90% by us doing that, whatever we buy at the state level. And so, but we want to make sure we're buying something that, has high value to you all. And so this is one that we needed to know soon. And that's the reason I've been pressing on the KD staff to give us the green light to go up or down with it. Because as Dee Dee says, it takes weeks to get it customizable, but we want to get the good green light. So I suspect today or tomorrow, based upon these results, I will get the green light to go forward with that. So we can start moving forward with that. Let's go to number. Thank you for those that have circled back, and that number was the lowest one that we had feedback on, so that's going to be helpful to us. Let's go to 9B. Okay.
And David, just to allow kind of to expand on the campus learning, it may be of different value to different districts. Even if you already have an LMS, you may see the most valuable portion of campus learning is to be a fully integrated data exchange. So you've got your complete interoperability with your LMS. That might be where you see the most value is. As standards get pushed into campus this year, you may find the value with the additional standards and aligning those to courses and curriculum and stuff like that might be where you find the most value. In campus learning, it might be that you find, fully integrated suite will really help you with the communication, standardizing communication to parents and students across the, schools and districts consistently might be what the sweet spot you find. So campus learning is a full range of services. I won't say it's a complete LMS, but, it has some of those tool sets in it that can help regardless if you have another LMS or not.
So this is worth going to talk about. Unlike the online registration, this one we're trying to get a feel for. You see, it would be optional, where we don't have to buy it for the entire state. So if we're not going to need to buy it for the entire state, we're wanting to know what percentage of students will use it. Because what we'll do is, if we're going to use 50% of those funds, I will let our chief financial officer know that the amount of money that we had budgeted for this can be reduced by 50%, 30%, and used, for something that's non-technology related that the COVID-19 funds can be used for. So this one is, unlike all the other ones I mentioned, this is the one that is not got we have a cost, and with the cost estimate that we gave for that portion 19 was based upon if everyone used it. So we'll want to, and I'll ask the field staff to circle back to you all, because I want to be fair to the other program areas, because right now our technology office is given the top priority for those funds, to be honest with you. So if we foresee that 50% of the districts will use it and 50% won't, and actually it's going to be higher for 50% just given these numbers here. Let's say it's 70% really intend to use it and 30% don't. Then we will say that 30% of the funds that we had allocated for us, you now can reallocate them to somebody else. So if that got bumped because the OETs was the top priorities, then you can go to those other priorities with those 30% of the funds. So if you haven't responded to that, once again, these numbers will be pretty important to us to make our cause. So
David, not to break in again, but just a lot of you aren't sure, and that's understandable. You might not be working with the Infinite Campus side of things all the time, and that's always a kind of a struggle with this group. Some of you do, some of you don't. But start reaching out to your cases points of contact in your district or your leadership in that area and ask them what their interest level is, because it's going to be important for us to know this, to go move full steam ahead.
And to Dee Dee's point, we know, and this is always tough. Some of you just really mainly focus on the pure technical aspects and don't deal with the data side. We do ask that you, if you don't, because we don't have a special webcast for all these different groups, is, reach out to your chief academic officer, reach out to your DPP, reach out to them and have this discussion with them, because I'm not having a separate discussion with all of them. I'm counting on you, even if you don't have that response. We have X number of districts where their CIO EdTech leader really has all aspects, the administrative technology, the instructional technology, and the pure technology aspects, and the administrative is the data side. So if you only have one of those three or the two of those three, we really count on you to go have that discussion, because they're probably not getting it from any other place, to give us a feel for this one. And this was one, along with online registration, that we really want you to make sure that you are going out. I think you're familiar enough with these other topics that you could have answered, but go out there and talk to them about this one.
David, it'd also be interesting to know if you're one of the 9 of the 69 folks who were able to respond, what other solution. It'd also be interesting for our team to know that as well. I think Dee Dee, you would be interested in that.
Yeah, and just put that in Go Soapbox if you're one of those that has that, because we're not going to be able on the fly, add another question surrounding this. This has been really helpful. Let's go to 9C. So Andy, just to take you off or I guess this is you, Marty. So you can just go to it. And that number should be that high. Actually, it should be close to 100%. And be honest with you, I don't know how a district has that discussion without including the technology leadership. I don't know how you do that. So, if you're having trouble getting this, on your superintendent's radar screen, let us know. And we could perhaps have a discussion with them, the importance of including you all in these discussions, because I'm on the other gamut of that. I'm in every conversation, so not only have my meetings tripled with every leading group, is I'm really not, I can't just, zone out and be working on other things during them, because it's all during it. They're talking about it. So my world is on the other extreme. I would be yes, 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 yes.
And Dave, it's probably worth noting that, of the percentage of districts who responded no, it's a high likelihood that due to just now wrapping up close of school, that some districts are not yet able to transition to the conversations about reopening yet. Yeah. I know they're speaking, but in terms of actual planning, collaborating, and getting that, so we would hope that at least a strong portion of that 21% would just be because those conversations haven't really ramped up yet.
And, Katie recently put out documentation about some guidelines, some words of wisdom about beginning the next school year. Nationally, those are just being grabbed and used, because there's no other state that I'm aware of that has done that. And it's interesting. So nationally, that's being very well received. Within Kentucky, and Kevin Brown was talking about this yesterday, there is, I don't know if it's 50-50, saying it's too prescriptive, and the other thing is not prescriptive enough. So that's interesting as you look at. So there's that documentation that's out there. Without seeing Go Soapbox, the discussion question we ask you to respond to, I really hope you do sometime during this webcast and then soon afterward. And I'll ask the folks that are looking at this, what topics cause you or your technology staff alarm concerning involving technology-related conversations about COVID-19. So for those looking at Go Soapbox for me on my behalf, what answers have we gotten so far for that one?
Staffing concerns, concerns about what happens when this one-time money goes away, that sort of thing. But you are getting several good responses.
Good. And just so you know, even though I'm not looking at them now, I look at my staff knows, and Andy, Megan in particular. One of the first things I ask for after these webcasts end, and when we're done for a period, I go, I kind of see the charts, kind of see every answer. So I will see all of them, as does much of our OET leadership team. So even though you don't see me do that now because I'm got these other things going, leading a presentation, I will definitely look at it. So please provide to that. And then based upon where you're heading hearing so far, I'm hoping they discuss this. What kind of EdTech and non-EdTech expenses or initiatives do you feel would be funded with the ESSER and GEAR funds? So those that are looking for that on my behalf, where are you seeing bubble to the top?
A lot of device-related talk there, David, with the one-to-one expansion or beginning, and some things Marty alluded to earlier.
And as we talked about, there was a couple items that we said we didn't ask specific questions. Did those bubble up to top and Go Soapbox, or do you think those were in the discussion questions? So anyone on my staff, you can speak. You can speak because you bring the ability to speak.
Both, David. Yeah, actually both. There's a strong bubbling up in the social question, Q&A that the one that's risen to the top is, I suspect, the people side. While it's important, will be challenged given that these are one-time nature of these federal funds, and we've discussed that quite a bit. But also in the discussion questions, you're seeing some of that mirrored as well.
So this takes us to our next topic, and I said this will be probably the longest one we've done, and I apologize for that, and recognize some of you may have to leave, but these are all monstrous, and I'm boiling down tons of meetings that are occurring over the next 2 weeks with your superintendents, with your finance officer, the chief academic officers, and try to make sure that they are on your radar screen as well. You're trying your best to sit at that table. So I appreciate the feedback you've given and will continue to give. I can tell you very close to people are comparing how do we graduate, but tons of time and energy by all types of groups about the beginning of next school year. And so what Marty Park has been, and his team has been part of these discussions. And yesterday, and actually it's been a couple of different groups that I asked Marty to present to our KD leadership team. And Marty, I'm losing track of the time. I don't know if that was this Monday or the previous Monday, or sometime in between then. And then I know you presented to the education continuation group yesterday with David Cook, who's really leads our non-traditional instruction. But I've sent you the draft, and Marty, I don't know if it's you've made any major changes to it. In the invite that I sent you this morning, there were two documents. One is the updated technology standards for students. Our original one was in 2008, and we're getting ready to propose that those be updated here in 2020 to our state board in a regulation. And the other one is the models. And, Marty, you can bring them up, but Marty is bringing up the different models. You're going to have X percentage of kids that come that don't kid. You can have A and B. You may have the students that don't have internet access at home, and the best way you're providing it is they actually come to the school. Is your technique a way you're addressing it? So he has addressed 4 different models, and we talked about those previous websites. We've never showed you what they look like. And so, Marty, you look at it on the PDF as well. But Marty also presented yesterday 4 digital strategies that go beyond the models, but they involve the models. So, Marty, I'm going to turn that over to you now.
And thank you, David. And I'm going to tie all of those things in together, hopefully succinctly. I'm going to connect all these pieces. And so, number one, if you go to the KDE website, and if you've been there recently, you'll notice the top banner where we have our COVID-19 webpage. And I just wanted to point out that in the FAQ section, you're going to see a lot of what David has hit on already, which is guidance for the GEARS funds, guidance for the ESSER funds, which is CARES Act funds. I wanted to point those out, but also this guidance for schools reopening. And that's a piece that was released last week, which David mentioned. We've received nationally received a lot of positive feedback on locally in our state. We're all trying to figure out how we help the most. And I keep saying it that way because that's really important for all of us to continue to work together and help each other. So this guidance, this is the initial guidance set. It's 15 pages, boiled down from over 100, which we don't believe would have been helpful. And so in there, you're going to see a piece that talks about models and schedules. And I wanted to just share briefly what that is. And David shared the PDF, and I'm going to zip through what we know right now. I'll zip through that. We've talked about that extensively. And look at, right now we're looking at we have things that by June 15th, we believe KDE will need to do. When we start talking about reopening schools and what summer looked like for us as leaders, as well as, ramping up or leveling up our teachers from a skill set, to include more online, digital, distance, remote learning strategies. There's extensive professional learning that has to be planned and implemented, which David's already hit on as well. We know that the governor may have to sign an executive order. KDE will continue to work on that, as well as districts to continue our superintendents to give a push. But more importantly, this third box kind of hits on if we're not able to get out in front of planning in a way that makes most sense, then we may have to completely delay the start of the school year. What that looks like for all of our individual school districts is different. But if we try to look at, and what the guidance document goes through is an early start, a traditional August start, and then a late start. Lots of feedback already on if the early start's even possible. Obviously, the governor's office has been very upfront, and the governor's been very upfront with the reason that is something to discuss is in the event that there is a spike or an influx later in the fall of the coronavirus, then potentially that start will help onboard our students in a better way. Again, lots of feedback on that so far. But those three options get us to these schedules of what it can look like to work with kids. And I know that all on one screen, these four models, but we wanted to pull this up just to show you and be able to talk through. This is captured in the initial guidance. I think one of our strong CIOs and leaders in the central part of the state, Erin Wagner, tweeted out that she was on page 5 of that guidance and already was getting kind of stressed out on Friday. This, I think, is captured in from a not visually, but with words. This is captured on, I think it's on page 6. But our field staff is prepared to work through and talk through what some of this can look like. And so David mentioned the scheduled rotation idea, where that could be groups of kids coming to school to achieve more social distancing, which means a change in bus routes and fewer bus runs, because fewer kids would be physically coming to school. If that may make sense. And that may make sense to start planning around that, which would also mean that you would plan for some students to be at home. And so from a digital learning implementation perspective, there's a lot of design work that could go into that. Obviously, these are all tough. These are all challenging. And it's important to make sure that we all are understanding that none of these would be something that these ideas would be something that we would just naturally move towards, but in the, we're rising to the challenge in a sense. And so whether that's students coming, groups of students coming 1 week, over the weekend, extreme cleaning for another group of students to come in, again, getting down to a class size that makes sense for social distancing, and obviously conversations about what lunch looks like and special areas and resource areas and what that can look like will come into play. That would also entail students doing a lot of on-demand or asynchronous type of digital learning through learning management system platforms. Model 2 is a model that is already making sense. And again, if you're like me, and I know David has as well, and others of our leadership team and our field staff have read a ton of reentry and reopening articles that all from all stuff. I think it's important to understand that a synchronous or a live streaming to students while at home is important to design around. At least have some conversations around how that can make sense. There's obviously, we've done some initial analysis to know that our current bandwidth from our schools will be good there to broadcast out live using Teams or Google Meet or something that you already have. We're not talking about implementing elaborate camera systems inside of each classroom. We're talking about using things that we already have. And we know that what that can look like is completely different. So planned interactions with our students will look completely different. But this does allow for some students to be identified to come to school. This could be students who quite simply don't have internet access at home. This could be students who have differentiated needs actually come to school. Again, lowering the number of students in school. Physically, and then live broadcasting out to students at home. That also entails digital learning design work around that on-demand learning experience through learning management systems and things like that. So it's important to understand that. Model 3 would be this hybrid approach of having groups of students scheduled to come to school, but then also broadcasting out. And so maybe flipping that schedule. So this group of students comes this week. We don't, at this point, we don't feel like a Monday, Wednesday grouping. We feel like that's extremely difficult due to the cleaning that will need to be in place, those protocols in place. And so Model 3, this hybrid approach, has received some favorable conversations back and forth as we're thinking about from a leadership perspective. Again, this is all really difficult planning and design work, but with the leadership we have in place in your district, with you, and working together as a team, we feel like we can all help each other get to something that is successful. Obviously, is going to look way different, or can look way different than a traditional August. Model 4, we've talked about quite a bit, and it's just important to note that as we accelerate the work to expand to a regional, online and virtual expanded schools academy approach, this is a regional model where regionally we have host districts. As we've already mentioned, we know we have 21 school districts who invite students from other districts to take classes online that they're offering. So we will be approaching and working through our host districts to figure out what this can look like. We're going to have to accelerate this work. We know that we're going to need more full-time online and virtual approaches, expanded learning approaches. That's full-time students. We do believe, and we've already heard of an uptick, and I'm sure you can respond to this, of parents responding to homeschool applications and needs. We're going to have potentially some parents who are not feeling comfortable and safe sending their kids to school. And we need to be prepared for that in the event that that's a reality for us. And so having an all online approach, and we're targeting 6th through 12th grade at a regional, with regional models. We feel like can be successful. There's a lot of planning that needs to go into that. The PDF that David sent is just to capture this. We have cleaned up some things. Again, we're in rapid design mode here, and so nothing's 100% perfect. But we wanted to get this in front of you so that you can have additional conversations with our field staff to talk through what others are thinking. Collaboratively in our regions and across our state, we can help each other move move things forward and have some real design conversations that are successful for our students.
Marty, I think you've done something too to add is part of this we suspect will be part of the toolbox forever. So you have a homebound student, and instead of them just being a one-off and they're done a different way, is districts have found a way when things, let's say, get back to whatever normal we want to find it. Let's say it's a year, 18 months from now. You have a homebound student. Now the teacher is very familiar with how to include someone that may be temporary homebound or is there for quite some time into the classroom. So as we're taking a look at these designs, and if when David Cook and Marty were talking about it, and I know you're going to talk about digital strategies next, is we're looking at things just not for the short term, but we suspect will be around and they're good practice, like learning management systems and other types of things are good practice ongoing. It just won't maybe be to the scale that we'll be doing it the next 18 months in percentages, but it will be there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And these have been good practices for over a decade, and we've been prepared to I think scale and implement faster based on all of the work that we've and that all of our district leaders and working with our OET team and our KETS team to be ready to respond quickly. I think so. From a just wanted to share a couple more things from a typical classroom perspective, from a spacing. This is a capture from a real and you have this PDF, but from a real architect plan for one of our school districts in Western Kentucky, and so one of our schools in Western Kentucky, and so just to kind of think through what that spacing can look like. Again, not ideal. No one would ever pitch that these are great conversations that we would have dreamed to get into now, but we do believe that we're going to develop some practices that extend and are sustainable because they are good for kids. Some, not all. And so I wanted to point out, and here's a URL, oet.news/KAS for tech. We shared the same hyperlink we've shared it for the past several months, but our Kentucky Academic Standards for Technology will go for first reading in just a couple weeks to our Board of Education. We've already received some positive comments there and feedback. But the reason that's important now is for such a time as this, that our students, that we highlight and articulate the skills that are needed today, and then the ability for our students to apply those skills. And that's exactly what we're talking about in terms of making sure that our students can thrive in an environment where there's blended engagement, both digital and physical, and that we can interact with learning content in new ways and digital learning designs in ways that are successful for kids that are students to transform learning through technologies. And so I wanted to pull that in, David. I know that was a conversation we were wanting to have, but I wanted to just weave it in because it leads to these four digital strategies that you will see if you dig into the guidance documents. You'll see us really start to press in on and target as professional learning opportunities, but also just district by district and school by school design work. This that I'm showing now is a part of some professional learning kind of workshop materials that we've developed to help move these conversations forward. Our field staff are prepared to lead through this as well. But from a four digital strategies perspective, access at home is vital. We've talked about that a ton. Access has several components to it. That's not just one device per kid, because we already know that if we send one device home to a family of three, that's problematic, and we're not going to have as many successes as we need there. And so access at home is a device per kid. Also, internet access is vital. We will also pull in digital efficiencies into that access, making sure that all of our kids can get to the things they need when they need it. That pulls in security components, but also digital citizenship. That's all involved in access at home, which is extremely important for us to move forward with. Number two is a learning management system consistency. This is a consistent approach per district. We've talked about this already. This is strategy number 2. This also includes communications. In other words, as a parent of a single student, if some of my teachers of my student communicate through Facebook, while others are through Infinite Campus, while others are in the learning management system, we have a ton of overload and inconsistencies and confusion. And if we have multiple kids in a household, that only magnifies and that only presents additional complexities there. And so we believe that from a strategy perspective, being consistent on not only your learning management system for structured learning experiences, but also through those communication strategies is really important. Strategy number 3 is the people side. These are the supports that we need. Our digital learning coach network is expanding, continues to grow. We do believe that an offset in funds while CARES Act funding, the increased relief funds can be used for some technology implementations that frees up maybe some operational dollars to support additional people supports. We just believe it's vital that, and we've always emphasized, and we'll continue to emphasize, that the best professional learning that we have is through great learning leaders who understand digital implementations and understand digital strategies for instructional design and other key points. And so that's strategy number 3. Strategy number 4, that's a winning strategy, is understanding how to design the experience for kids. It's not necessarily just about teaching or instruction. It's about learning and trying to get to learning design, which incorporates live components, and that can be obviously at a distance like we're doing today, but also on-demand components. That also includes adoption components, understanding what our students are using and not using, understanding the total cost of learning, total cost of investment, or total cost of ownership, what we're paying for in terms of licensing and tying into that adoption. But then finally, the third component in this experience is understanding the impact. Is it making a difference or not? We believe that we have what it takes and that we can work together to present an opportunity where school and district leaders can have a real conversation about the whether it's digital curriculum, whether it's apps and services that students are engaged in, which also pulls in, extreme conversations on screen time and project-based learning designs. But is it making a difference or not, tied to some pieces that some measures that we've leaned on in the past, whether it's formative components or not. So we believe that this digital learning experience is the home run. If we can focus and get through the other 3 strategies to get to the 4th strategy, that our students can have a great learning experience even during this time. Dave, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, appreciate it, Marty. So much like all the meetings I've been on, and even the one that we have, there's a one I think today with superintendents, and they always schedule like for an hour and think they'll just be, and it always goes 2 hours. Yesterday was an hour, always goes 2 hours, just because of all the immense things happening in a short period of time. And so this one's heading along that path as well, of us going along the 2 hour mark, because all the things impacting education technology in a very short period of time to finish the school year, and as we plan for the next one, have to during this time here. And we're going to talk, part of this too is just the bandwidth part. And we recently, and I've asked Phil and Brian and others that you want to make to be on here, upgraded our internet our main internet pipe to 200 gig. And the important part is Phil educated me on, unlike your home internet access to where you have a percentage of upload and download, which is usually a pretty big disparity, is that disparity does not exist in K-12. And so the bandwidth we have is designed to have, very similar upload and download speeds. And it comes into play as Marty went through all the different strategies and models. If we have teachers in the school building, whether this next school year and beyond, they are doing a lot of things going outward, we feel it can handle that. Now, obviously, we're working with our KH3 provider. then making sure that as we look to do this in mass and scale, they're ready to do that. So Phil and Brian, what other comments do you think need to be made about the successful upgrade, and anything else you want to mention about what Marty was hitting on?
Yes, David. Well, last weekend, we were able to successfully upgrade our internet pipe from 80 gig to 200 gig. And we continue to do bandwidth upgrades for school districts. And we continue to make sure that we have a really good network in place, including, we're going through the switch upgrades. We're starting the UPS upgrades. So we want to make sure that all of that is really in good shape and to the best it can be when we start school, because we really believe that the network patterns that we've seen in the past, which are traditionally lots and lots of download and very little upload, will be flipped if we have teachers in classrooms, in every classroom in Kentucky, doing some kind of blended learning and streaming from those classrooms. So we're really going to be stretching and stressing the upload part like we've never done before, because it's always been a real small percentage of the total bandwidth usage. We're very confident, and we're going to test the internet part of that. We're going to test the district KIH3 connection, and then we assume and we think that all the school to district connections are full, what we call full duplex. In other words, you could do a gig down and up at the same time, and that's the way they should be designed. And the part that we don't know, that we don't have a ton of confidence in, is the home internet access, where you will, for instance, here at my house, I have 100 gig or 100 meg, but I only have 10 up. I have 100 down, 10 up. So there's quite a bit of disparity there when it comes to that. So obviously, in all of these models that Marty has talked about, the home internet part is a new part for us to include in our total K through 12 access portion. So, Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
Okay. No. That pretty much sums it up. I think that one of the things that you highlighted there that I thought was pretty important is that we're continuing to move, even in these unprecedented times, to keep on improving what we have out there.
Yep. Thanks. So let's circle back. And you heard me briefly talk about it, but I want to spend a little bit more time on the hotspots and things that have come up in the past 2 weeks or month that I do really encourage you. And I saw from the number you say, well, this is not really happening to us. And make sure your superintendents, your finance officers, your chief academic officer isn't going out and having discussions without including you in this conversation, where you are that person for the Charlotte Hornets. It's just getting almost knocked to your knees or knocked to your knees. You're educating them on, hey, can this be done through a smartphone versus buying a separate device? Because those separate devices got quite a initial purchase cost to them. If you look at the service costs, the cost to see is $60 a month on average. Obviously, you can go way up on that. The part that will come into play, and it's been for my 25 plus years, the blind spot that people have on how much bandwidth they take up individually, and just how much video just crushes what they're doing. If they're watching a movie, they're watching a YouTube video, especially if it's non-instruction related, and how fast they can eat up. If there's caps on that hotspot, how fast they can eat that up. And how do you educate, a family, let's say you're providing these hotspots to the student there, that they can quickly eat through them, and they just can't, they need to use some other source if they're going to do the entertainment things, non-instruction related, because they can just crush it. And also the cybersecurity and safety of it is, SIPA has been required since 1998. With E-rate, we have that as well. When the district gets in the business of just not sending a device home, but being the internet provider by paying for it, that puts you in a whole different position. And what the student does with that, but also making sure the whole family is not using that, especially for non-instructional purposes. And obviously, you have to be included in that discussion to really make sure a device that goes home with the student or a hotspot that's set up is really just used for that student and used for instructional purposes. The other thing that came up recently for me, and I know the field staff's done a good job, is about buses. There's very few of our districts that have actually put Wi-Fi on the bus. And Kentucky was one of the very first states to do that. And that was, I think, back in the 2013, 2014 timeframe, and it made sense at that time where you had students going and maybe spending an hour or longer on a bus going back and forth to school, so they could do schoolwork on the way there and on the way back versus just that hour being eaten up on the travel. However, during that same period of time, we have seen a tremendous rise in the amount of students with a smartphone with internet access. And I always use internet access afterward, because all of you that buy smartphones know that nearly 100% of the time is you got to buy the data plan associated with it. So as a very high percentage of students already had a smartphone with internet access, the need for the school district to provide internet access on the bus dropped, pretty dramatically, and understandably so. As folks are taking a look at this, and some good, well-intended folks are going, why don't we just have buses solve this? We have school buses, and we'll just solve that issue. Well, for those that are familiar with it, is obviously the Wi-Fi was meant for students to be all on the bus, and we don't want to create a hotspot for COVID-19 by having these students all piled up in a bus. So obviously we got to remind folks that there's a very limited range that these folks can be accessed outside the bus. And I think the misunderstanding is, well, I can just park this bus right next to an apartment complex, to a low-income housing area, to an apartment area, and it reaches inside and touches every dining room, every bedroom, so the students can just go in there. And it reaches like 0% of them, unless you're parked right next to the window of that particular apartment on the ground floor or in the low-income area, or the trailer, you happen to be parked right next to it. You typically have to get out and access it. And if the weather's bad, it's raining, it's too hot, it's cooking hot, or it's cold, you can't access it. And a lot of folks are not going to drive a car just to get close to it. This 99% aren't going to do that. So part of this is just educating them on, what's the likelihood of this being used in those areas, and obviously in a very rural setting, which you're not put, next to a, low income area to where there's a lot of folks there, is you can't pull up, but you can't reach, the homes. You can reach them for 5 minutes at a time. And even I'm aware of one district, and there may be others, that, they go to a low income housing area, they stay there for 4 hours on a Tuesday, and then they go to another spot on that Tuesday. And so really during the course of the week, it's 2 times a week for 4 hours each day. You can say it's better than zero, but if you take a look at, folks are saying, well, this is a major solution. It's not really a major solution. So I want you aware out there, those people that are, particularly companies that sell Wi-Fi on buses, can turn existing bus or new one into it. They're not giving folks the full picture. That this does not reach into the homes. It's got to be nearly a perfect day for folks to get out there and do it. It can't be, in a certain location very long. So I just want you to know that is occurring, and make sure you're somewhat working to the conversation with your superintendent. Next item, and I didn't want to circle back to the Charlotte Hornet example, is legislation that happens. And for the most part, the way it works for our Office Department of Education, we are not aware that a piece of legislation is getting ready to be proposed until it's done. And I say that's even true for the Department of Education for the most part, is anyone that's proposing a legislation, they would ideally come to the department, especially if it involves education, and say, I'm thinking about doing this, and get some input before actually submitting it. And I would say that's the rare exception versus the rule. And so for the most part, where the folks we see it, we're kind of reacting to it, getting it stabilized, and trying to give folks, while nearly all the legislation is well intended, the unintended negative consequences of that, and to make sure they're not addressing something that is 1% broke for 1%, that actually makes it 99% broke for 99% by doing this one piece there. And we try to educate them best we can. what we've come to realize is virtually none of the districts have anybody that keeps up with folks during legislative session. So if there's a piece of legislation that 90% of districts or 95% of districts would not be for, it's afterward that they become aware of it. And there's that one or two districts that it serviced them and maybe only serviced them well. It didn't service the other 98% well that are called to come in to testify. And it just gives the impression that it's a much higher percentage than it really is. And so that happens through it. So the reason I give that context is to not complain and say, why didn't I know ahead of time? Why didn't Katie let me know? And why did Katie make the legislation like this? Why would they have proposed it? For the most part, it's brand new news to us as well. And we, or they're not, at least from the technology perspective, they're not understanding. Most of the time it involves technology. As I say, has it got electricity? Has it got internet involved with it? Has it got data, voice, and video going back and forth with it? Has it got the word digital in it anywhere? So we go over those again and again. And much like you all, is there's folks that just look at us and say, you're the office of just computers. And that represents a really small percentage of what we do. So we're in the reaction mode to most of these. So I'm going to go over these briefly. Lisa Moore in our office, who does a variety of things, but also is our liaison of our office trying to keep up with this within KD. So Lisa, you can jump in anyway. And she educated me on one of these, which I got it wrong before in our OET huddle. So this is for our OET staff members to correct what you heard before. Senate Bill 263 was passed and will begin in July. And this is to establish a virtual high school. Any district can do this for those that have dropped out that are 21 years and older. So I'm not sure, I'd be interested from, just in your comments. If you're the district, I wasn't aware that this was a big demand and that districts are really wanting to go forth to establish that. So I don't know if this was like one of those situations where one district approached them and the other 171, it doesn't really play out and the legislator didn't know that. So I'd be interested if you were the one that was interested. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I was going to think it's good. You want to help everyone get across the finish line, whether they're 21 and younger or they're 21 and older. So I think this is a good thing to do. It's just, how well will that work with the average district setting it up for just that purpose. Senate Bill 193, once again, the intention of this is good and we're supportive of this. I would have made it broader. And we've hired Son Jackson to help us out with this from Mason County. Is computer science. We want a higher percentage of, just like everybody does, middle school and high schools aware of computer science and offering those courses. This was geared around unrepresented groups. And I would say, well, every group needs it, just not unrepresentative. So if you're addressing everybody, regardless of who they are, you're also representing the unrepresented. So our goal would be to, and it shouldn't be tough in these times, to increase the interest and offerings of computer science in school districts. And a lot of times that's the limitation of just having the teacher available to do that has the background. Typically your math teachers have that. If the math teacher leaves and does that, who teaches math? So that's but that's on the radar screen. I think that's a good thing. House Bill 312, I talked about this in a previous webcast. I'm not going to go through it in detail. And Dee Dee, you can share what you want with it. But once again, the intention of this is good. It's to make sure that the transfer of student records is as fast as it can be between districts. This particular legislation was focused in on foster care students. And obviously there's they could be in a bad situation, bad spot. So you want to get them moving from one place to another as fast as possible. But at the same time, the unintended negative consequence is if you try to move that record too fast, just like, and Mario loved this, I'll use the school bus. If you are given a shot clock and you're trying to get these kids loaded on school buses within an incredibly short period of time, even shorter than they normally would do it, the probability of a child getting on a wrong bus and going to the wrong spot is, ups pretty dramatically. And obviously that's not a good news story. That's not a good story for the child. That's not a good story for the parent because they're, scared to death, but also makes the news, brings negative attention on the district. The same unintended consequence could be with this of trying to get it done in a very short period of time and accidentally send the record to the wrong spot. So the deal with this one is there's a shot clock. It says the day that the district's notified, and it can be at 3:00. And of course, school, whatever time it is, 3:34. is to transfer the record to the receiving district. Obviously, they tell you at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7, you have a better shot at it. So if you send the Infinite Campus records very hurriedly, hopefully you're not sending it to the wrong spot, but it ups that. And we know with, that top secret data of student records, sending it to the wrong school is not a good thing. It's not, I don't know if it's as bad as a child getting on the wrong bus, going the wrong spot, but it's up there. So the other part is the legislation was written. Well, if it, they have up to 3 days after that initial sending it to reconnect other stuff that should have gone with that initial Infinite Campus file. So if Infinite Campus is not up on your radar screen and you don't keep up with it, I can tell you, and DD can say it, once that file goes, it goes, it's gone. And trying to reconnect stuff that should be in it 3 days later has very low probabilities of being successfully happen, and has very high probabilities of it never making it back to its original file. So that why is the intention of trying to make sure it's as right as it can be when it initially goes. And there's a requirement of this one in this coming December to report of the processes have been improved. Now we know we can see the data, 99% of the time it's sent within the same day. And there may be good reasons for that other 1% of trying to make sure it's right, but there also may be reasons that aren't so good and explainable of they just didn't get to it. And if you have a student in a bad situation, that's a problem for those. And even if it's a 1% situation, I always tell folks, I always tell folks, is this a 99% broke for 99% or 1% broke for 1%? It's not like I ignore the 1%. Always circle back, but try to find out what's unique in that circumstance. Is that unique to a district? So our intention is KDE or OET is not presenting on this in December. We're going to try to find out whatever the legislature, had is the district they had in mind is having an issue of not getting these records back fast enough, and or having other districts talk about how they get, these student records quickly to them, the things they take in consideration. And so obviously this could impact all students. And I asked Dee Dee earlier, is there an easy way to identify a student that's a foster care student from everybody else? But obviously any parent's interested in those occurring quickly as possible if they want to make sure they're accurate. So if the receiving district lets them know, I think there's a way to identify, and I don't know if there is an identifier on there that does it. But the focus of it was foster children. But if there's not an easy way for the district to tell, then they'll be thinking they're on the shot clock with it. So, Dee Dee, is there anything else that needs to be mentioned with House Bill 312, or did I say something incorrect with it that needs to be corrected?
I think the only thing I want to make sure it's clear is the time clock starts for not just the sending district, but the receiving district. So if you have a caseworker walk in the door and they might not have all the paperwork, the school is still supposed to initiate the records transfer request from the prior school immediately. There's not, let's wait till we get all the paperwork and figure this out. So there's really got to be that intent to really ask the right questions, make sure that you've got the right student before you do that records transfer request. And then when the sending school gets it, they've got to respond back to it by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So the time clock starts on both ends.
So the good news with this is with folks not understanding technology is the original way this was written is the receiving district would have the technical rights and privileges just to go grab the record of the sending district. And we had to spend quite a bit of time educating folks is these aren't set up just like, and I always have to use, and I think it's always valuable to use how the paper world works and the real life world works, because people think the digital world is differently. And I said, no district that's supposed to receive it walks behind the counter, goes inside the files physically, grabs a file without getting prior knowledge and permission, and leaves the school. And that was the way the bill was originally written, is the receiving can just go in there and grab within Infinite Campus anybody they want to bring to their district, which has 10 levels of chaos and probability of major security breaches and problems associated with that. So the win associated with that one was we got that taken out. And that was, once again, after it was proposed. Obviously, we would have, had that considered when it was originally proposed, way before it was proposed, and worked pretty hard on trying to get, a reasonable amount of days and educating folks on, once we know 99% of the time, it's quick. But if you were experiencing, you're one part of the 1% folks that went bad, you're a parent or a situation that that really keeps up with it, then they want it fixed, and under from their perspective they want it, but we were just trying to make sure they understood the unintended consequences, and so you all have to think about how does that work within your district. So I want to make you aware of it. Also, there was House Bill 352, where area technology centers are the current ones of the 53 are given the option of becoming their own locally operated versus them being part of KD agency operated. And I think so far only 4 have done that. And I don't know how that impacts or doesn't impact the services if you're that host district the way you operate before, but there's only 4 so far that have done that. So those are the legislation that have impacted. We had one that impacted just one organization that I won't go over with. But Lisa, is there anything else that you would like to mention education technology related that I missed?
David, the only one that might be worth mentioning is Senate Bill 177, which was basically the COVID-19 legislation, which dealt a lot with the extending the NTI days. But there was also some considerations in there for contract staff at the schools that, if anybody's interested, they can go out and look at that. But almost everything in that bill was only for ending this school year. However, there is a report that will be due from KDE on how each school district closed out their year and the number of instructional hours they got to and all of that. So they will be following up to ensure that every school district met those requirements.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Marty, we present here early in June to the Kentucky Board of Education a reg that kind of says ignore what we did back in 2008. We now want to add new wording. I sent out to folks in the PDF the new technology standards. As Marty, we'll talk about that. We ask him to talk about every time in the subject. This is not, we're not doing a test on this every year. Districts have the full range of latitude on how they define that their students are meeting those, because there's a competency-based standard that districts are supposed to every student by, I think, the 12th grade, and that was supposed to start happening in 2012. Has been proven to be competent, in technology standards. So folks were saying, well, what are the standards? But we're not saying what the measurements are or are not, and never will, because there's no test, which would cost $1 billion to do a specific test just on technology. So this is mainly by observation and student work that folks say they're good to go. So Marty and Laura have been leading this area. Are there any other major things that we want to make districts aware of about the student technology standards?
Yeah, and David, thank you. Laura Raganos has led this work from our office, but the bulk of the work, and she would share this as well, is and every time she gets a chance, our writing teams, which several members of our writing teams are on the call as district EdTech leaders, but we also had teachers and faculty members from higher ed, which is a part of the required formulation of the writing team. These were revision. This is revision work as opposed to new writing, as David pointed out. And the last thing I think I wanted to push on, David, was exactly what you said. And we go as far as to in the actual standards document, we articulate the methods by which, so the best practices of students performance-based demonstrating competency. And that's not a test. And there are many ways to do that. Many of our districts already have that in place and have ways to get at students demonstrating learning by using technologies is what it's all about. And the thing that we point out over and over again is the original technology standards, which we have revised, and our Kentucky Board of Ed will do the first reading of removing the old technology standards. That's a required step. That's 3:303. Administrative regulation. Those standards were targeted at learning how to use technologies. Our new standards, as implemented, and they're now in their own individualized or customized regulation, as opposed to lumped into a bunch of academic standards. So the new academic standards are in their own administrative regulation. and are targeted at transforming learning through technologies, which get at that, as David mentioned, that minimum graduation requirement of demonstrating competency in. And so not only are we defining the competencies through the academic standards, but we are also identifying best practices to demonstrate through performance-based measures. That's things like participating in STLP and demonstrating learning through technologies, or having a defense through your graduate profile through some kind of digital means. Those are all great measures.
Thanks, Marty. So let me pause here. For those that are watching Go Soapbox, which I'm not able to do because leading it, is there any, from all the topics we've talked about in the main, before I go into these other quick hitters, is that we need that's bubbled to the top? You say, David, you need to be aware of this now so we can discuss it.
Would you allow me a moment for a quick follow-up, David, just based on a couple of those comments and something you said earlier?
Sure.
You made reference, and we talked in other meetings about the Wi-Fi on the bus and the hotspot strategy and things like that. And I think a couple of things that I've seen in some of the comments and that maybe I would want to ask, perhaps. I don't know what pressure you could put on ISPs around the state with the hat that you wear, but if you could remind everyone that we've got a last mile home internet problem that we've had for decades, not any kind of new problem that districts should be trying to solve. And then the other thing, I think, just like you mentioned earlier with analysis paralysis and not wanting to see, state funds get held up while we try to implement something and work on the perfect solution. It's kind of the same way with the hotspots and the Wi-Fi strategies out there. I see districts trying to, there's an urgency to do something, right, to help these families. And so I think, hope something that you would reiterate is that when we think through this out loud, we're trying to help insert valid questions, and we're not trying to scold anybody for things that they're trying to do to solve these very relevant problems.
Great ad. Thank you, Jody. And yes, well said, as not surprised there. Not necessarily SCOTUM, and some of these I know the enormous pressure. I hear it on there and trying to guide them to the right spot and understand the long-term impacts of it. But, part of our CETS partners are, we've invited them to watch this webcast, and I will definitely use it to remind them, they really need to help and reach out to districts with the last mile. As most folks know, we've had a middle mile network in Kentucky since the mid-90s. And that middle mile, and it was in every county. The middle mile had to be put in, was established in order for us to do a last mile connection to the school. There's recently we've been putting in another middle mile. In most cases, it's going along the same exact path that the existing middle mile. So you have at least 2 middle mile providers in every county, but that's never been the problem. 95% of the issue is the last mile. It always has been, it always will be. And counting on a last mile provider to put wire to the house is, for a high percentage of the ones not done, is low probability. So what are the different other options that folks can do? A low probability, I would say, within the next 6 months is a better way to phrase it. The next year, maybe in 5, 10, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, there's wire at every house, no matter where you're at. But what are the interim solutions for those that aren't there yet, so they're not there sitting around? So I don't begrudge anyone that's doing that. So thank you for that ad. Let's talk about the next item that we have here for quick hitters. The STLP State Championship. I know we have Jeff Sapolsky on. My intention is, Jeff just wrote something up for me we did. It's one of the coolest things in my working career that demonstrated the value added at what we do. I've always thought STLP was one of our best marketing things that we do, because for the average person in the day, regardless of what all we do, is they see these student products, and it's an understanding of all the effort and time and energy that we have with education technology for students. If these are some of these results of it, which are pretty amazing, then that money is well spent. It's one of our best marketing things, and so we have a high percentage of our school districts that do that and have STLP. And we have, percentage that don't. We're always working on them. And maybe you have something that's very STLP-like, but not STLP. But the next step is Jeff has created something that today or tomorrow I'm going to send to every one of our Kentucky Board of Education members. encouraging them to look at the projects that were the state champions and the projects that were just that close to being a state champion, and actually open it up and look at them. And, our state champion projects were about, how do you help homeless students? How do you help? That was one of them. That was the elementary one. How do you help a student that's bound into a wheelchair get down the steps fast in a school emergency, whether it be fire or other types of school emergencies out there? And really dramatically coming up with a technology design that addressed that, coming up with a technology design that helps a firefighter. Was our high school winner, and our overall technical one was a technical solution that helped police officers. I mean, if you take a look at those things, they're so worthy, and all of them are about helping their fellow students, their fellow teachers, their school, their community, and the sophistication through them is through the roof. And if you take a look at the runners-up that I've asked Jeff to bring up, pretty amazing too. Plus, we got the lieutenant governor to say some words about our STLP state championship and our Kentucky Board of Education chairman. So that's going to go out to you next. I'm going to encourage you to make sure your superintendent sees that, encourage that superintendent to open it up, your chief academic officer, your PR officer. I'm going to encourage you to send that to your legislators, for them to see it, because as we're talking about the money here, and Jeff and I talk about this all the time, one of the best ways to say, folks, you need, money for education technology. This is one of the best PR tools that is out there. And so we really encourage you. We'll try to do something at state level to see if, we can get our folks here to send something every legislator. But I got to tell you what, there's nothing like it coming from you. It's just like when I send an email out to Katie's agency staff, 5% of the staff, even though I've been around for 28 years, doesn't know me, doesn't know who I am, and is unlikely to open it. So I send it to their associate commissioner and ask their staff to open it. Then I'm going to probably get 80, 90% probabilities. Same thing happens with this. We're going to have a great higher percentage probabilities if you all ask for, as we go through the years, additional funding, but also ask your legislator to open and look at something than we do. I mean, we can do it, but there's nothing like it coming from you to have someone open it up. Jeff, is there anything else you'd like to add to it, to 2020? I appreciate Jeff and all the folks in our districts and that gave of their time to be volunteers and around the state. It was just absolutely one of the coolest things I've done in my 28 years, besides just seeing us turn around so fast and be so valuable in a short period of time because of all the stuff we've done 25 years. Doing that state championship was one of the coolest things that I've ever been part of.
Yeah, I would just, David, all I would add is that it was maybe one of the most meaningful STLP events that we've pulled off statewide, and a thank you to everyone who is on the call, because in some way you have helped make it possible for these kids to pivot and shift really quickly to this all online, all digital version of the state championship. And the fun, I honestly was concerned. I'm like, it might be a few folks that'll participate, but it was overwhelming how many folks managed to overcome the hurdles and challenges to participate. And the best part was these kids, it was like second nature to them. They were completely comfortable in this different medium. So thank you to all of you who participated. And, thanks to the folks behind the scenes who, we have a lot of CIOs, DTCs who play a big role and played a big role in this. And thank you for that. And looking forward to next year. And here's a little sneak preview, as we were just talking about the Kentucky Academic Standards for Technology. And Marty mentioned STLP, but we're working to actually tie all of our STLP rubrics to those standards. So if you're trying to figure out how you're going to get your teachers to incorporate the tech standards, STLP is the way to go. Piece of cake. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. And once again, as I send that out today or tomorrow to you, I encourage each one of you to look at it. These aren't little tiny, heartwarming stories. I mean, this is major projects that they're working on. Big, sophisticated projects. So when I was their age, I can't imagine doing it. So it gives me great hope and faith in our future. Dee Dee had a couple items on school report card, infinite campus services, and our training. I know we had a discussion question on it to give an update on. And Dee Dee, if you're speaking, can't hear you.
I was trying to get off mute.
Okay,
school
there you go.
Card, just so everybody knows, last week closed out the financial transparency data collection. I'm sure the Office of OFO is actually trying to get with districts if they see questions on it this week. It will be released next week with the financial transparency portion of it. The rest of the school report card, we're really on schedule to release what data there is going to be available in the fall, just like we would any other year. Of course, we won't have any assessment or accountability data this year, and the accountability side of the school report card is going to be hidden for the 2019-20 years. So that's kind of a school report card update. There are some trainings available in Infinite Campus, and some functionality that Infinite Campus has rolled out. If you are that person that's interested in that, or if you're not, please help share this information. We do keep the training page updated. Infinite Campus is offering online Mastering Campus class for a reduced cost of $99. It's normally about a $700 cost class. That's an online only class, but if you've got folks that are new and working with Infinite Campus, please make sure they know about that. We'll have beginning of year training in July, just as like we have in other years. And then we've got some new functionality within Campus on like the snapshot comparison that will help with some of the grading struggles as closing the end of year out. And then there's some forums that are open to Infinite Campus. One, gathering districts information on what they're looking to do for the opening of the school year, because we can open in a lot of different ways, but at the same time, we got to figure out how we collect the data that's needed for federal reporting. We can't forget that piece of it. That's not a driver, but there's impacts there that we can't forget. So share anything that you're doing within the Infinite Campus forum so they can take a look. They've been very willing to kind of step up and do whatever's needed to try to come up with alternative solutions. They've proven that as we've closed out this year, and we're looking forward to partnering with them for some new solutions in the fall this coming year. So the only other thing, a lot of you do get the questions raised to you about billing. Infinite Campus did send those bills out in April. If you've not seen them or your financial officer has not seen them, you can get copies from the KDE data request mailbox. You just send us an email, but you do have time to pay that. If you've got the money in this year's time frame, go ahead and pay it. That's fine. You can pay, but it's not actually due until August 15th. So you do have time to get that payment. Just a reminder. That was a quick update, David.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Very well done. Mike, quick update. I know I saw that the third KETS of offer is going out or getting ready to go out. We got everything we needed in, and the KETS contracts, anything new, substantial from what we talked about the contracts and contracts we have on the radar screen.
Yeah, the third offer district should have already received notification of that. So if a district hasn't received notification of that, notify your KETS engineer so they can let us know, or you can contact me directly, obviously, if for some reason you haven't received that. But the school facility construction office has sent those notifications out. As far as, we've got a lot of RFP activity. We've got the RFP activity on our instructional devices, which is of great interest to districts. We will be working on an RFP for our networking components as well, as that contract expires in the upcoming calendar year in the February timeframe. So we'll have that in place for E-rate filing for the following fiscal year. And there's several other RFPs and contracts going on. Don't necessarily need to go through all of those right now. If anybody has any questions on any kind of RFP activity or contracts, and keep in mind when we talk about RFPs, we're limited on how much we can go into the details of what's going on with those.
Yeah, and a couple of those, Mike, is we know we're going to have gaps in time because we're trying to line it up to E-rate, and there's just some that end that we've put out notices that if you're going to buy during this gap of time, or with this non-gap of time, because we'll have this gap of time before these are established and put in place that are E-rate eligible, and even the ones that are non-E-rate eligible.
Yep, and the KETS engineers, the field engineers are pretty, they're well versed in the status of those and the things that need to be thought about that. I know they're having those conversations with their districts.
Thank you. Phil, you talked about this a little bit, that we've continued on with our bandwidth upgrades and our switch upgrades in districts. And I don't know if you mentioned that, you want to go into more detail about the UPSs and passwords. So I'll just give you, a couple minutes if you want to, if you want to hit on something you didn't get a chance to earlier.
No, I think I covered most of the thing. We just want to keep our network healthy, because we know when whatever model we use is going to be important that our network works very, very good. That's something that we've been focusing on all spring, and we'll continue to focus on during the summer. And then for the passwords, we are continuing that upgrade for KDE, the agency, and we realize it's significantly harder, more difficult, as our staff are telecommuting versus being in the building and on the network. So just wanted to kind of throw that out, that we do realize that that's significantly harder. And Bob may have some words of wisdom for districts that are going forward with the password policy too. Or maybe not. So, go ahead.
Well, obviously, and districts, you guys identified this pretty quickly early on, and that was that you need to kind of slow things down a little bit, be more precise. And what I would say is what we've mentioned before, and that is continue working on this and making sure that the folks who are your prime targets do get their passwords strengthened, and then also make sure that you're taking care of your basic security stuff, like not sharing your passwords, not opening up every email. Try to get your banners in place on your emails to make sure that your staff can identify when an external email is entering the system. So if it's pretending to be your superintendent or you or someone else inside the district, it's easy to determine that person or that email is actually coming from outside. So that basic security stuff is still super important. Just because we're all working from home doesn't mean that we suddenly have to have some sort of super new security system in place. It just means we have to pay attention to the basics, even more so now than we did before. Thanks.
The last item we have is I was part of a Region 2 meeting, and the question came up, and we've given it some research to the need for a teacher to say, they're trying to communicate with parents and students that are using a variety of ways they want to be communicated with, and communicating with that parent and that student in the most preferred way that are most likely to open quickly. So 20%, 50% by email, 30% by Facebook Messenger, 10% by text, the other 20 is like Snapchat. So instead of the teacher having to write a customized for each one of those, just have a device or a service that they write it once, and all they got to do is set it up once for their parents and students, and it goes out automatically. So we found that there's a variety of providers out there that do that. And so if you're interested in who those are, so the first thing is there's a variety of ones out there, but we're not marketing and championing any one of these vendors. They've not gone through a competitive bid process. And so, but if you're in that situation, it says, what would you all find? Understand we're not making one endorsement recommendation. Here's 3 or 4 that we found. There's probably 30 others, but I just want you aware that those exist. So to close out today, I appreciate those, hanging in here for the entire time, or even part of the time. We knew this one was going to be a long one. Just because the nature of really the items that we cover in the first hour and 15 minutes are items I normally wouldn't cover in normal times. This would have been like a 45-minute or hour one. But given that the topics that we're hitting on and the reason we're having to get them on, we had to spend the time on it and want to make sure you're aware of it. So I hope you saw added value in it as well. I appreciate your participation in the Go Soapbox, and you still have some time to do that. Hope you all have a good summer break. I will be hanging around for the next 15 or 20 minutes afterward like I normally do. So just so you know, when we start these, I'm on it usually a half hour earlier. So if you want to speak then, and definitely a half hour later, you can do that as well. But thank you. Thanks for our team, Office of Education Technology. Thanks for all the districts, and thanks for everybody else out there, our CATS vendor partners and our educational cooperatives and others that help us do some awesome things for kids. Take care.